Welcome to On the Agenda. This is Douglasville City Manager Bill Osborne. My special guest today is City Finance Director Karin Callan. Now, Karin, you've been on CITI TV with me before. When people watch us on CITI TV, they expect that we're going to be talking about budgets and finance, and certainly we're going to do that today from the perspective of the City of Douglasville government. But I want to start not by talking about finance, but by talking about the finance director. I know you're not like me and moved to Douglasville, Douglas County in adulthood. I know you grew up here. I remember when your son Kyle was born. That was a few years ago now. And I remember when you worked very hard to become a certified public accountant, a CPA. But fill in the blanks for us if you would. And by the way, it's great to have you back on CITI TV.
Thank you. Good to be here. Yes, I am from this area. I went to Beulah Elementary, Stewart Middle School, Lithia Springs. I still see a couple people that I went to elementary school, middle school, and high school with. Right. Melinda Callan down the street, the attorney, she went through school with me, and Tiffany Jackson, who owns Atlanta West Jewelry. I still her occasionally, and she went to Beulah, Stewart Middle School in Lithia. I went to Georgia State University, right. And I received my CPA in 2007. Right. And Kyle will be 9 this year.
That's hard to realize,
I know,
isn't it?
I know.
Well, you know, when you first came to work for the City of Douglasville, tell us what you were doing and what were you doing before you came to work for us?
I started out of college. I started to work for Georgia Tech and the grants and contracts accounting in downtown Atlanta. Right. And I saw actually my mother found the ad for me in the paper that was advertising for the accountant position, and that was when Bill Epps was here as the finance director. Right. So I was basically handling most of the professional duties associated with the finance office.
Okay. And then, of course, he resigned back in 2004, and we said, okay, let's give you a try. So you were named acting finance director. Obviously did a very good job, because I think in May of 2005, you moved into the position that you're in now, and you've done a great job.
Thank you.
You're a lot of fun to work with. We have a good time working together, and I appreciate the working relationship and the friendship we have. And as I've told you on a number of occasions, you're a very valuable member of our staff here in Douglasville.
Thank you.
Now, we both know that I'm through your department almost every day. Spend time talking briefly with members of your staff. I've told you and I've told them that when I'm having a bad day, or even if I'm having a good day, if I go through the finance department, it always makes me feel better, and so I appreciate you and your staff and all that you do for the city.
We appreciate you too.
So,
I always know you're in the office whenever I hear the girls laughing.
Okay, now before we start talking about the new fiscal year, and of course fiscal year 2012-13 started on July 1 and will go through June the 30th of 2013. I want us to look back a little bit on fiscal year 2011-12. I know, Karin, in the spring of 2011, you and I were trying to figure out how we could give the mayor and the members of the city council figures on revenue projections that would be realistic, yet on the conservative side. And we were concerned, of course, about the continuing downturn in the economy, what was going on with foreclosures, declines in housing values, and looking at the income that we receive from sales tax revenues, how that might play out in the months ahead. But now, of course, we can look back in hindsight on what we did in the spring of 2011. And frankly, I think we did a pretty good job in providing information to Douglasville's elected officials about what might take place over the next 12 months. But if you would, just share with our viewers on CITI TV what we were looking at back in the spring of 2011 on projected revenue stream, what the city might receive from property taxes, sales taxes, and a couple of other of our significant revenue sources. And then tell us how things appeared a few weeks ago as we closed out the fiscal year.
Okay. Sales tax represents around 29% of our total budget. And this fiscal year, the projections for fiscal year 11-12, which is the fiscal year that we just finished, we projected a 0.5% decrease. Well, this will be the first year that we've actually had an increase in sales tax over the past 4 years.
Right.
We actually had an 8% increase. So we had a gain there of about $331,000. So that was good. We were very conservative there, but that was good for the city. For property taxes, we budgeted a decrease. Unfortunately, though, the property tax digest came in lower than we expected.
Right.
So we weren't as conservative as we should have been on property taxes, but we were only off by around $60,000. So,
which when you're looking at a budget of how much, $21 million?
Yes.
So that was very close, I would say.
Yes.
And now, and then if you look at the expenditure picture that we had, and of course we repeat every year on this program that state law requires us to have a balanced budget. So when we talk about the amount of money that we've got that we're showing on revenues, certainly we're not exceeding that from an expenditure standpoint. And of course we've always have made sure that in terms of our general fund that we were not having to dip into reserves in terms of our general maintenance and operations part of the budget. But as you look back over this past fiscal year, Police Department, Parks and Recreation Department, for example, and just give us a report on what our expenditures look like.
Okay. For the Police Department, we budgeted $9,065,000. The actual expenses were $8,576,000. And Parks and Recreation, we budgeted $1,371,000, but the year-to-date actual expenses were $1,657,000, which we amended the budget throughout the year.
Right.
So our additional increases in sales tax that we received offset some of the increases in expenses that we had.
And the fact that our property tax revenues had dropped a little bit.
Yes.
Okay. Before we look to the new fiscal year, I want to focus on 3 other topics. I want to talk about the special local option sales tax, SPLOSH, a couple of major construction projects that we had, and then our general fund reserve fund, our fund balance. And let's start by giving our viewers on CITI TV kind of a wrap-up report on our part of the 2002 SPLOSH. Of course, a countywide referendum in 2002 approved the collection of a 1-cent sales tax countywide, and in advance the Douglas County government had determined what part of the revenues that they would use on particular county projects. We had an agreement with the county that they would provide to the city from the collected sales tax revenues a certain amount of money to use on specific city projects. Ours to be Parks and Recreation on one hand and roads on the other. And basically we've completed those projects. The last one we had in Parks and Recreation was the renovation, reconstruction of Hunter Park, and I hope our viewers have been out to enjoy that park. If they hadn't, you need to take a look at it. They did an excellent job with it, and that was certainly, I think, a good finale to our SPLOSH program. But give us a couple of bottom line figures from the 2002 SPLOSH on Parks and Recreation.
Okay. At West Pines, we collected and expensed $6,405,000 that we invested into the West Pines Golf Course. Hunter Park, $8,056,432. Jesse Davis Park, $1.9 million, and we also did some small improvements at Fowler Field, $80,300.
Okay. Now, with the roads component, all the projects have been completed except for a couple of small sidewalk projects, and you know, time flies, and so it's almost hard to realize that we're talking about a SPLOSH that provided funds to do the widening of Hospital Drive, to do a series of intersection improvements and other improvements on Chapel Hill Road, many street improvement projects, intersection projects, new sidewalk projects, resurfacing, and of course one other big project was that we completed the preliminary engineering for the Highway 92 relocation project, as well as the environmental work. That now has been turned over to the state, and the state is in the process of acquiring right-of-way. But in terms of our roads component on SPLOST, what was the amount that we have spent? And then give us the figure for parks and road components combined.
Okay, just with SPLOST funds, we spent $13,091,000. Total SPLOST is $29,786,000 that we were able to invest in infrastructure in the city.
So give me those figures again in terms of parks and roads.
Parks, $16,694,676.
Okay.
Roads, $13,091,744 for a total of $29,786,420.
Okay. Of course, that has been a major part of our capital improvements program for the last few years, but I guess you could say with virtually all the projects being completed, we've kind of closed the books on that SPLOST program. But there are two major construction projects that we need to touch on. Probably the two biggest single projects, each unto its own, that we've had in maybe the history of the city of Douglasville. First, of course, was the new public safety municipal court building on Fairburn Road south of I-20. Douglasville voters, of course, had passed a general obligation bond issue referendum to provide funds for this project. Karin, give us kind of some of the financial facts about this building. And you know, we've said that with the construction of the public safety municipal court building, that should take care of the police department's needs for a long time to come. But tell us about this.
Okay. We issued $23 million in general obligation bonds for the police building. We did have to put some additional dollars with that from general fund. This will be, the bonds will be paid off in full in 2029. So it was a 20-year issue. Okay. The annual payment is $1,712,000, and the millage rate necessary that you'll see on your tax bill is 1.643 mils. Okay.
All right. Now, the other big project, of course, is the Douglasville Conference Center under construction across from our CITI TV studios here on Church Street. The new facility is scheduled to open right after the first of 2013 arriving. And of course, the new parking garage is expected to open early this fall. And we expect the cost of this building and the parking garage to be paid from a combination of our hotel motel occupancy taxes as well as from user and rental fees. Give us a little bit of specific financial information on this project, if you would.
Okay. We issued these bonds through the Conference Center Authority. The total bond issue was for $13,410,000. They will be paid off in 2035, so this is a 23-year term. The annual payment is $981,300. This current fiscal year, however, we only had to pay $147,000 because with the bond proceeds there was included capitalized interest, anticipating only the conference center only being open for half the year.
Okay, and you know, these were two very large construction projects for us, and but I believe we were able to get our money's worth on those because by having them built at a time the construction industry was certainly in a tough situation. I think we got better pricing than we would have gotten had we been doing those projects, say 3 or 4 years earlier. I want to talk about one more fiscal subject before we move to the budget for fiscal year 12-13, and that's our fund balance. Now, on February the 6th of this year, the City Council adopted a resolution concerning the fund balance for the city's general fund. Sometimes we refer to the fund balance as the reserve fund, but either way, it's basically the money that we've got in our bank, in the bank account. And essentially, this resolution adopted 1st of February pointed out that at the start of the fiscal year, in July of 2011, we had a total fund balance of just about $9.4 million. But prior to the end of calendar 2011, the mayor and the city council in office at that time had allocated some $1.8 million to pay for various capital projects that they had approved. And then prior to the end of the year, about another $1 million that was to be used for ongoing projects, road projects primarily. So when all of these projects were looked at by the current mayor and the current city council, they identified that they had an effective fund balance of $6,482,000. Now, I know the Institute of Government at the University of Georgia has compiled a list of, I guess, the top 10 things a local government needs to do or not do in order to maintain a healthy fiscal, F-I-S-C-A-L, a healthy fiscal condition. And one of those has to do with fund balance. Tell us about that.
Okay, the GFOA, the Governor's Finance Officers Association, and the Carl Vinson Institute of Government recommends that governments at least keep 3 months worth of operating expenses as their fund balance. Ours is equivalent to $4.5 million.
Okay. Now, with that $4.5 million that Mayor Persons and the City Council had said that they would determine to keep in the fund balance, when you subtract that from the figure that I gave a minute ago, which was right at $6.5 million, that basically means that we have some $2 million that would be available at this time for capital projects. And while $2 million on the one hand seems to be a lot of money, that we know that in the big picture that it's not a lot. And so I think in the months ahead that we will see both the elected officials and staff being rather choosy insofar as deciding what new projects that would be approved for city funding. But now let's talk about fiscal year 2012-13. We have 4 separate budgets. So when we talk about adopting the budget, we generally are talking about adopting 4 different budgets. Identify those 4 budgets for us.
Our general fund, which is our chief operating fund, the largest fund of the 4. Then we also have the sanitation fund, which is our enterprise fund, and our 2 special revenue funds are the conference center fund and the Convention and Visitors Bureau fund.
Okay. Well, let's start with the general fund because, as you say, that's by far the biggest and the most comprehensive fund. Start by giving us kind of the bottom line information in terms of the dollar amount for the current fiscal year and some other information you may want to share with us. And as you're talking, our viewers will be able to see a chart that your staff has prepared that will maybe help them understand the figures that you're covering.
Okay. The total budget that we adopted for fiscal year 12-13 recently, $21,454,013. Starting with the revenues, our sales tax at $4,593,000, property taxes at $5,987,000. That represents 28% of our total revenue budget, and sales tax represents 21% of our total revenue budget. Our franchise revenues, which comes from Greystone Power, Georgia Power, and our other franchise companies at $2,069,580. Fines and forfeitures at $1,741,000. License and permits, $2,021,000, which represents 9%. Alcohol tax, $989,000, represents 5%, and our Parks and Recreation revenue, $1,227,474.
Okay. And one of the things that you pointed out, that our 2 big sources of property taxes and sales tax are still less than 50% of our revenues. And so, you know, we've talked before about how fortunate we feel like we are to have a diversification on our revenue stream, that some local governments are depending almost exclusively on property taxes or sales tax, and even a few on alcohol beverage taxes. Now, although the dollar amounts did decrease because of the economic downturn over the past few years, sales tax, property taxes still are our 2 major revenue sources. But you mentioned a couple of others. Tell us a little bit more on occupational licenses and alcohol beverage revenues and hotel motel occupancy taxes. Review those again for us, if you would.
Okay. The hotel motel tax is $492,355, and that represents 2%.
Right, in the general fund.
Right, in the general fund. And it also, hotel motel tax is also collected and distributed to the Conference Center and the Convention and Visitors Bureau Fund. Business licenses and permits or occupational licenses represents 9%, which is the $2 million.
Right.
21,950. And again, alcohol tax is $989,000.
Right, and I think those three tax revenue sources kind of emphasize our position as a retail trade center.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about how the plan for expending that $21.45 million during the current fiscal year. And again, we have a chart that our viewers can watch, and while you cover how we plan to spend that money.
Okay. Generally, police department takes the largest portion of general fund budget, and that's standard across all municipalities. The police department represents 41% of the total general fund expense budget. Parks and Recreation at 12%, and this increased over the prior year due to the city taking over the West Pines Golf Course.
Right.
And that was
as well
wrapped
as
in.
Reopening Hunter Park and everything.
Yes, and reopening Hunter Park and having that going on for a full year. Our general administration is $3.9 million, which represents 18%, and that covers legal, city manager, finance office,
Right.
and so forth. Our street maintenance and public works department is $1.795 million, which represents 8%. And the debt service represents 11% with $2,229,600.
Okay. Let's talk about the debt service for just a minute because, as you say, it's 11% of our general fund budget. Now, I know that a relatively small part of this, about a quarter of the debt service amount in the FY 12-13 budget is to make the annual debt payment on the Hawthorne Community Center in Davis Park, as well as the fire station in the downtown area. That leaves the other 75% on debt service. So tell us what that's for.
Okay. Yeah, this year also was the first year we had the debt service payment on the West Pines, so that was one of the changes from last year to this year. And the total, as I mentioned earlier, the annual debt service payment for the police administration building is $1.7 million, and that is the 75% of the total 11% of our portion, and which was self-imposed by the voters.
Right, right. You know, in the police department, and we got a slide that we're going to be showing, and I'm not sure that that if you have any figures on that, or certainly we can look at the slide that just shows, because the police department is divided up. You've got the administration, you've got detectives, special operations, motors, courts, records. I'm sure that I'm missing patrol, the biggest one of all, detectives. So when you look at the fact that is our biggest department, it also has components in that department, many of which are bigger than any other department we have. So as our viewers have looked at that, that has given them a good idea of the breakout on that. But you know, when we talked earlier about the public safety and municipal court building that the police department's operating out of, and of course the sale of bonds we did to be able to build that facility. Okay, Karin, switching subjects. We're going to take a quick look at the sanitation fund budget. This, of course, is an enterprise fund, meaning that the only revenues that go into to this fund are derived from residential and sanitation fees. And then, of course, all expenditures have to be for sanitation purposes, landfill services, recycling, garbage and trash collection, street sweeping, activities of Keep Douglasville Beautiful. And the fiscal year budget that we have, the balanced budget this time, is $3,627,304. Now, you mentioned two special funds earlier. The first is the Convention and Conference Center Fund. Tell us about that.
Okay, that is the operating fund in which we will use to operate when the new conference center opens. We have the new conference center opening in this budget we've projected 6 months of operating expenses for the new conference center. The revenue sources we have for that are the 3% hotel motel tax at $427,000. We also have activity rental fees for the current conference center, and then for half of the year for the new conference center.
Okay.
And also the rental car fees and fees for the catering service.
Right. And of course, as you and I both have saying, you got the new conference center that will be opening the first of the year. 6 months remaining still in this fiscal year. The good news is we'll be getting revenues from it, but we'll also have expenses that we will be incurring as that facility is in operation. And I would simply insert at this point to our viewers that if you have an interest in holding some type of event in the new conference center after the first of the year, if you will get in touch with the City of Douglasville, we'll make sure that you talk to the right person and can make your booking, or you can go online and get that done, I'm sure. Now, CVB, Convention and Visitors Bureau, tell us about that.
That total budget is $343,338. It's funded completely by the hotel motel tax, and it is for tourism in downtown Douglasville.
Right. And we've mentioned hotel motel occupancy taxes on several occasions because you got CVB, you got the Convention and Conference Center Authority, you got the general fund, and when you combine all of those, I believe that's 8%.
Correct.
And so that's ends up being a very sizable revenue stream for us that's divided up in 3 different ways. Now, as we move to the conclusion of today's program, I do want to take just a minute to say that we had a lot of people that spent a lot of time on putting this budget together that was approved by the Mayor and City Council in June. Producing a balanced budget doesn't just happen. There's a lot of work that has to be done. We try to make sure that our budget preparations are grounded in good financial basis, that we make good decisions. We had directions from the mayor and from the chairman of the finance committee to take a conservative approach, which we normally do anyway. We started work on that budget. I guess you sent things out to the departments back in March. Had a lot of people in the departments producing a lot of information. When we first sat down with the departments and went through listening to them and doing a lot of cuts on what their requests were, because even though we tell the departments to hold back, a lot of times their needs come in and we're far above what our resources are. But even when we made all those cuts and we looked at it, we still were more than $750,000 over what we had projected revenues to be. So we had to go back and take the knife to the budgets again, and everybody worked together to get that job done. I appreciate what you and your staff did on getting things ready for the departments, and certainly all of our departments worked well on this. And by the time we got started with the meetings with the mayor and council at the end of May, we had all of our budgets balanced, and so that meant as council members, the mayor, any changes they wanted to make, if we were going to add an expense, we had to cut an expense somewhere. But I would point out that all of our elected officials worked very effectively with staff and with each other. We had a lot of questions that we had to answer. Compromises did have to be made, but you know, by the time we reached June the 18th, we got a unanimous vote of approval on each of our budgets, and that's very good. Well, Karin, we've completed another On the Agenda program concerning budgets and finance. I always give my guests an opportunity for a final comment, so here's your chance.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
Well, it's always great to do that. Appreciate the work you do and that your staff does. Appreciate your dedication to the City of Douglasville. To our viewers, we appreciate you watching our program today. Until next time, this is City Manager Bill Osborne signing off from On the Agenda. And God bless you.